Hi, I'm Cale Street. I'm Vice President of Research with Ondine Biomedical Incorporated, and we develop medical device products for treating bacterial infections based on the platform technology of photodisinfection.
How do you define success?
How do I define success? I think in a broad sense, success is really related to having a balanced lifestyle, having professional fulfillment, enjoying what you do, combining that with individual fulfillment in life as well. I think in a corporate sense, success can be defined as really being able to provide a solution or a product to someone in society that has a need.
Where did your inspiration come from?
I think inspiration, in my case, really came internally through my imagination. I think you always have to listen to your thoughts, your dreams, your daydreams. There's always ideas coming out in your head subconsciously that you don't even necessarily know are there. I think from external cues, inspiration is important as well, and I've taken inspirational cues from just observing people, society, and what needs aren't being met in society and how those can possibly be addressed.
How did you move from idea to something actually succeeding in the market?
Well, I think ideas are great, and there's certainly an initial stage where things can be very free-form, idea generation, ideation, brainstorming. This is where the innovations and the inventions really come from. But when it comes time to make those ideas into reality and into products, there's no substitute for following processes and best practice, especially in a regulated industry like the one I work in, the medical device industry. When it's time to make an idea into a product, you follow the standard processes. You establish your cross-functional teams, you work within a regulated environment, you follow best practices in development, and that really brings you to your destination. It's certainly not the time at that point to be following sort of free-form ideas. You have to freeze designs, you have to test, you have to validate, and these are some of the maybe more boring things that a lot of the innovators and entrepreneurs, don't have as much of an interest in. But I think really these parts of development are almost just as key as having the great ideas to begin with, knowing how to translate them into things that you can manufacture and sell ultimately.
How did you organize your team?
As far as team organization, in the work that I do, I don't think there's really anything magical to it. I think it's about creating cross-functional teams, bringing the expertise together into a project team that has the tools to execute on a certain job. In the medical device environment, it's certainly bringing together regulatory, clinical functions, engineering, even marketing very early on, together into a functioning project team that can work together towards a common goal. I think in the specific team members, it's really important. I mean, the two most important things are certainly experience and attitude. I probably tend more towards looking for attitude necessarily over expertise, and each person may have their own views on that. But within certain limits, I truly believe that as long as you find the right attitude, you're not going to change a person's attitude, but as long as you find the right attitude, you can train a person to do or be what you need them to be, as long as they have, a half qualified background to do that job. So I think that's important in assembling teams, and it's really what I look for when putting one together.
If you could have, what would you have done differently?
I think there's one main thing that stands out that I certainly would have done differently in development of the current product with Ondine. And that is, we would have gone to the market, gone to the customer early in the process, and really understood what they wanted and what their needs were. We certainly had an idea of what the clinically unmet need was for the product. We had an understanding of the market that we wanted to play in, but I really can't emphasize enough, even at the early ideation stages, the prototyping stages even, having that voice of customer feedback into your design, into what you're doing, because ultimately these people need to have usability in a product or they're just not going to adopt it. It doesn't matter if the clinically unmet need is reached. So I would certainly, with the current product, look at voice of customer feedback much earlier in the process than we did.
What makes a great entrepreneur?
What makes a great entrepreneur? Definitely a mind for innovation, the creativity that goes along with innovation. I think the understanding, though, that innovation happens in many different ways. It can happen in big leaps, but I think, in my experience, more often innovation happens in little steps. And I think it's key for the entrepreneur to be able to understand and extract from those little steps what the value can be. I really believe that some of the most promising innovations actually come from somebody understanding a certain field or industry and a solution that's been implemented there, and knowing how to visualize how that can be applied to a different field and being able to implement it in that field. And I believe that, as opposed to the big light bulb ideas are great, but they're sort of, can be few and far between. And I think there's a lot more places to mine and places to go with looking at how current solutions can be applied in different areas. And I think the mark of a good entrepreneur is to realize and understand how those transitions can be made between industries.
What role did education have in your success?
In my success, I think education played a huge role. I think it's certainly not just about quantity of education, but really focusing on what are your goals, what do you want to become, where do you want to be, and how do you structure the education to get there. I think, in my example, in my early career, I was a researcher, very much on the science side, on the technical side, graduate school in the life sciences, so a highly technical degree. And that was very important in establishing some of the scientific processes and things that allowed me to innovate and invent later in my career. But at the same time, I realized, sort of at the end of that phase of my education, that I wasn't really prepared to help to bring these ideas to fulfillment. And that's why I started looking at the business side as well. So I found, in my experience, an MBA coupled with the technical graduate degree was the perfect combination of allowing me to understand some of the business side of things and be able to sort of straddle the line between the inventor and the technician and the product developer or the business person that knows how to bring it to market. And I think it's really key for budding entrepreneurs to be able to stand on both sides of those lines, to be able to at least speak the language on both sides, because I think without one or the other, you're really missing a piece of the puzzle that you're going to need to be successful.
What is the most important question we did not ask you in your answer?
I think maybe the most important question is, how does one best prepare themselves to succeed in the entrepreneurial world as an entrepreneur? Because it's a bit of a sort of a nebulous title and designation, and a lot of people like the draw and the intrigue of entrepreneurship, and I want to be an entrepreneur, but you can't go to school, or in the past, it's becoming more common now, but in the past you couldn't just go to school and say, I'm going to take an entrepreneurship degree. So I think an important question is, how does a young person prepare themselves for that type of life and that type of lifestyle? And I think the answer, at least for the people who are on the technical side, the researchers, the scientists who have the inventions, who think, well, I have all these great ideas, inventions, I want to turn them into companies, into products. I think the key is to prepare yourself for what the business world is, how companies work, understanding how to do the basic things like read financial statements and look at projections, understanding best practices in product development. Even if you're not experts in all these things, you just need to have a background and be able to speak that language, because you sure shouldn't let somebody else speak it for you and trust that they'll explain to you how things should be. I feel any true entrepreneur should, like I said before, really be able to function on both sides of the line, and I think it's important to prepare yourself that way for that type of career if that's what you want to do. And I think that helps entrepreneurs. Obviously, it's a game of numbers with entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of, there's some successful people, and there's a whole trail of, what you would maybe call unsuccessful people in the world of entrepreneurship. And I think, a key question is, how do I push myself towards that group of people who are successful versus all the mass of people that were unsuccessful in doing that. And you know, I think it's all about preparing yourself through education, through experience, through sort of global understanding of not just what it takes to invent something, but to also implement it.